The wine glass slipped from my hand. Right as my daughter-in-law's father collapsed to the floor, foam at his mouth, eyes rolling back. Everyone screamed. But I stayed silent because I knew that glass was meant for me. 2 hours earlier, I'd seen Melissa pour something into it. But before we start, I just want to say thank you for being here. Hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let's go back to that moment. I stood frozen in the chaos. Screams, shattered glass, the smell of red wine spreading across the cold stone floor. Everyone rushed to Leonard, Melissa's father, as he convulsed on the ground. I just stepped back, watching everything through the fogged glass of my calm. I didn't feel fear. I felt confirmation. Because I'd already seen this happen in my mind 2 hours earlier when Melissa thought no one was watching. That night was supposed to be a gentle ending. After 40 years in tech, I'd just sold my cybersecurity company for $18.5 million, a number that made everyone gasp. Ethan, my son, insisted on throwing a retirement party at the Lakewood Villa. "You deserve a celebration, Dad," he said, eyes glowing with a pride that never quite felt real. And Melissa, the woman who always complained about doing dishes, suddenly turned into Martha Stewart. She arranged flowers, cooked, even picked the wine herself. That's when I knew something wasn't right. I'm not naive anymore. A lifetime of designing intrusion defense systems taught me that the most sophisticated attacks always begin with something small, something that looks harmless. And I recognized that moment when I saw Melissa standing by the wine table, glancing around before pulling a tiny clear vial from her purse. She poured the liquid into the chipped glass, the one I always used for special occasions. I didn't shout, didn't stop her. I just pressed my lips together, stepped back, and smiled. To catch a predator sometimes, you have to play the prey. 2 hours later, when the party began, everything went exactly as she'd planned. Melissa was all smiles, carrying a tray of wine toward me. "Dad, have a little wine." "To celebrate a new beginning," she said softly, her voice sweet, her eyes gentle, the picture of a perfect daughter-in-law. I took the glass, thanked her, then set it down beside Leonard, who was chatting with a guest. A minute later, while she turned away to show off her new necklace, I quietly switched the two glasses. No one noticed. Not a single person. 5 minutes later came the crash. The scream. Leonard collapsed, shaking violently, white foam spilling from his mouth. Melissa screamed, "Dad, someone call 911." Ethan ran to help, and I just stood there in silence. Not because I didn't care, but because I understood someone had just failed in their plan to kill me. In the chaos, I stepped back and let the others handle it. When the paramedics lifted Leonard onto a stretcher, Melissa clung to me, tears streaming down her face. "Oh God, I don't understand. How could this happen?" she cried. But I could hear it in her voice that trembling wasn't grief. It was fear. I walked out to the porch, breathing in the cold air off the lake. Inside, lights flashed. The sound of sirens faded into the distance. People whispered, someone said, maybe a stroke, another murmured alcohol poisoning. But I knew better. I'd seen the liquid with my own eyes. I just didn't know why. Why my own son and his wife wanted me dead. When the ambulance was gone, I went back inside. Ethan was cleaning up the remaining glasses. I saw him pick up the chipped one, frown, then set it down. Our eyes met for just a few seconds, short but heavy. And in his eyes, I didn't just see worry. I saw fear. "Tonight's been awful," he said quietly. "You should get some rest, Dad. I'll finish up." I nodded and walked upstairs. But instead of sleeping, I opened my safe, took out a small notebook, and started writing every detail: the time Melissa poured the wine, the color of the liquid, Ethan's reaction. I photographed the broken glass, the table, everything, and uploaded it all to my cloud storage. Old habits from the job, but this time it wasn't about protecting a computer system. In my mind, a line of code appeared crystal clear: internal breach. Threat detected, family. When I closed the notebook, moonlight shimmered on the lake, cold and sharp as steel. Downstairs, Ethan's car engine started, then went silent. I knew this night wouldn't be peaceful. But one thing was certain. I just stepped into a new kind of game where the only rule is that the smarter one survives. The next morning, Lakewood was still fog-hugged the lake. I woke to the coffee machine humming like every day. But my mind wouldn't settle. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the swapped glass and Leonard's pale face. I wasn't ready to call the police. Not yet. First, I needed certainty who was I up against, and why. I logged into my bank account. 18 million and change sat there untouched. But I remembered Ethan mentioning handling investments for you and Melissa asking about the legal heir. Back then it sounded caring. Now the pieces fit ugly and precise. The phone cut through my thoughts. Ethan. Dad. I couldn't sleep. He said, voice tight but trying to stay calm. I still can't believe what happened to Melissa's father. How is he? I asked. Still comatose. The doctors say maybe a drug reaction. Melissa's shattered. A drug reaction. I let a small bitter smile form. Perfect cover. I put on a coat and stepped outside. Cold wind from the lake, damp air, a lonely bird calling. I needed someone I could trust. Eleanor Parker came to mind, the lawyer who helped me sell the company last year. Mid-50s, icy practical. I called her. Robert, what brings you to my office so early, she asked. Someone tried to kill me, I said. Short pause on the line. You serious? I'm serious. I have proof. I need you to look. 3 hours later, I sat in Eleanor's oak office, warm light on the walls. I told her everything down to the smallest detail. She listened, arms folded quiet. Decades of experience make me trust my gut, she said finally. My gut says be careful. If they tried to poison you once, they'll try again. What about motive? I asked. She opened a file and scanned an old will. If you die, Ethan inherits everything. No split. With that kind of money, motive's obvious. She told me to prepare quietly, update the will, set up a trust, and watch their finances. I nodded. I wrote transaction tracking software for banks, I said. Maybe it's time to use it. Back home that afternoon, I booted an old program. Minutes later, irregular transactions from Ethan's account appeared, high-interest loans, constant transfers to a bankrupt Portland real estate company. Melissa's jewelry shop, Melissa Hayes Jewelry, showed debts north of $200,000. Suddenly, the picture was as clear as clean code. They needed money. Fast. What chilled me further was what I found next. 3 weeks ago, Ethan and Melissa had seen Dr. Jonathan Reed, a psychologist who does capacity assessments for the elderly. Public records showed he'd been sued before for flawed findings, though nothing stuck. If they labeled me incapacitated, all the assets could legally transfer to them. Sunset bled red across the lake, and I sat there silent, the screen's data like small, precise knives. I saw Ethan's eyes that night, guilt tangled with fear. Maybe he wasn't the mastermind, but he knew, and he stayed quiet. Around 7, the phone rang again. Melissa. Dad, I wanted to check on you. Are you okay? She asked. I'm fine. How's Mr. Leonard? Still weak? I just wanted to make sure you weren't in shock from last night. Her voice was honeyed but tense underneath. She was probing. I answered lightly. I'm all right. I feel sorry for him. A pause. Then, don't cook for yourself. Okay? Ethan and I will stop by tomorrow. I'll bring some pastries. Bring enough, I said, pretending to joke. When I hung up, I breathed out. If they hadn't succeeded, they would try again. I called Eleanor and told her about the call. You need to act, she said flatly. If they plan to control you through paperwork, we'll make them step right into a trap. I'll draft a fake power of attorney. But first, we need solid proof of motive and their finances. Then what I asked. I'll introduce you to someone, she said. Marcus Lee, private investigator, quiet, better at pulling information than your software. I leaned back, the lamp casting a tired circle on the ceiling. My mind was running faster than the computer. The game had begun. This time I would not only defend, I would strike back with what I know best: logic, data, and patience. 3 days later, I met Marcus Lee in a small cafe by the river in Portland. He arrived right on time, lean frame, brown coat, calm voice, the kind of man who's seen too much of the world's darker side. I handed him a summary of everything that had happened. Marcus listened quietly, never interrupting. "What do you want me to find first?" he asked. "I need to know what Ethan and Melissa are hiding, who they meet, who they talk to, and most of all how they plan to try again." Marcus nodded, pulling a small notebook from his coat pocket. "I'll need a week, but if they're already moving, you need to be extremely careful. Don't eat anything they bring, don't sign a single document." I gave a faint smile. "Relax. I've written anti-fraud software for 20 years. The only difference now is the system I'm protecting is myself." That night when I got back to the villa, Ethan's car was parked at the gate. Melissa was carrying a box of pastries from the trunk, smiling like nothing had ever happened. "Dad, I brought your favorite apple pie," she said brightly. I took the box, set it on the kitchen counter, and invited them in. Tea time was painfully normal, too. Normal. Ethan talked about work. Melissa said Leonard had woken up but was suffering temporary memory loss. "The doctors say he's lucky," she said, her voice trembling just a little. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Yeah. Sometimes luck comes from someone picking the wrong glass." The room froze. Ethan cleared his throat and changed the subject. After they left, I opened the pastry box, took a small piece, sealed it in a plastic bag, and called Marcus. "I'm sending you a sample. Check if there's anything unusual." His reply was short. "Got it." 2 days later, he called back. The pie had traces of digitalis extract from foxglove, low dose but enough over time to stop a heart. A dry laugh escaped me. "So they did try again. What do you want to do? I'll let them think everything's going according to plan." Then I called Eleanor. "Time to flip the script." She gave a cold little laugh. "I've drafted the fake financial power of attorney. On paper, it lets them manage your assets. In reality, it only applies to one account, with exactly $3 in it. When they sign, it'll be proof." We set the meeting for Friday afternoon. Melissa was so eager she called 3 times to confirm. "Don't forget the documents, Dad. I'll bring a notary along just to make it official." I agreed, calm as still water. That morning, Marcus sent me a file of photos, Ethan and Melissa sitting in a car with a man clearly Dr. Jonathan Reed. An hour later, another photo of them withdrawing cash at a bank. At the bottom, Marcus wrote, "Possible. They plan to liquidate assets right after you sign." Reading that, I felt a chill, but also an odd calm. This time they wouldn't get the chance. That afternoon, I rearranged the living room. On the table sat the fake contract. A small camera hid inside the vase, the security system recording audio. Everything was ready. At exactly 3 o'clock, Ethan and Melissa arrived. She wore a pale blue dress file folder in hand. "Dad, I'm so glad you're letting us help with the finances," she said, smiling too brightly. "You shouldn't have to worry about money at your age." I nodded lightly. "You're right. Let's get it done." I signed quickly. Melissa added her signature. As soon as her pen touched the paper, I said, "Good. Everything's finished now. We just need the lawyer to verify it." Ethan frowned. "Lawyer. Oh, she wanted to review the paperwork. She should be here any minute." Then came a knock at the door. I opened it. 2 men in police uniforms stood outside, saying they were here about the poisoning case. Melissa's face went pale. Ethan froze. I stepped aside. "Perfect timing," I said. "Come on in." Before I could blink, one of them drew his gun and shouted. Down on the floor, I stumbled back, stunned. Ethan yelled, "No, help us!" It all happened too fast. Melissa screamed, a gunshot exploded, glass shattered everywhere. Then Eleanor's voice came through the ceiling speakers, cold and sharp. "That's enough." The main door burst open. Real officers stormed in, taking down the imposters. I stood still, my heartbeat slowing. In their hands, I saw the contract Melissa had signed, and the camera footage clear as day. Ethan collapsed, shaking. Melissa was silent, ghost white. I looked at them, said nothing. In that moment, I knew it was over. The game they started had become the trap they fell into. I turned toward the porch, the wind from the lake cutting cold against my skin. Inside me, there was no triumph, only a strange emptiness. Sometimes victory doesn't warm you, especially when the ones who lose are your own blood. The sound of police sirens still echoed in my head as they led the two imposters to the car. It was all over fast unreal, like I was watching a playback from one of the security systems I'd once designed. Ethan sat slumped on the porch steps, hands trembling. Melissa in handcuffs stared at me, wide-eyed, stammering, "Dad." "Did you set us up?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her long enough for her to understand. I hadn't set anyone up. I'd simply let the truth set the trap for the liars. While the real officers took statements, Eleanor walked in carrying her laptop with the video backup. She set it on the table and said coldly, "The entire conversation, the threats, and the part where Melissa hired the fake cops, it's all recorded. There's nothing left to deny." Melissa broke down crying, screaming. No, I didn't know they'd actually do it, but Eleanor's gaze was sharp as a blade. She wired them a deposit. "We have the records." The house felt heavy, suffocatingly quiet. I stood still, eyes drifting toward the lake. Lakewood's sky was gray rain hanging like mist. Everything I'd tried to protect home honor family now lay in pieces, the wreckage of a crime written by blood. When the police finally left, Ethan walked over. "Dad," his voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just thought, if you transferred part of the estate earlier, I cut him off. And you thought letting your wife poison me would make that happen faster." He said nothing. His eyes were filled with regret and exhaustion. I didn't know she'd go that far. I swear. I looked straight at him. "What disappoints me most isn't your greed, son. It's that when you knew, you stayed silent." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." I nodded faintly. "Your silence destroyed whatever could have been saved." That afternoon, the police asked me to come down to the station to sign the report and confirm the evidence. On the drive there, I sat beside Eleanor. She asked quietly, "Do you regret any of it?" I gave a sad smile. What good would regret do I just don't understand? When did a father's love become a weakness for his children to exploit? Eleanor sighed. People who are sharp in business often forget families don't run on logic. They run on desire. We rode in silence the rest of the way. When we arrived, Marcus was waiting. He handed me a thin folder and said softly, "Found this on Melissa's computer, a scanned life insurance policy. Beneficiary her. Value $400,000. I flipped through the pages. Under the signature was the issue date 3 weeks before the retirement party. A plan so precise it made my skin crawl. The next day, local news ran a short piece. Couple arrested for plotting to murder father to seize inheritance. I turned off the TV halfway through. I didn't need to hear anyone else's version. I'd already lived it. But life doesn't end at a headline. 3 days later, I got a call from Portland General Hospital. The nurse's voice trembled. "Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry, but you need to come." Patient Melissa Hayes attempted suicide in her medical holding cell. I was silent, not because of pain, but because I didn't know what to feel anymore. Still, I went. Not to forgive, just to see the end of the story they had started. Melissa lay in the bed, pale and still, eyes closed, wires running from her arms. Outside, Ethan stood in cuffs, head bowed, tears falling without a sound. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I didn't think she'd do this. I just wanted to save her." I answered quietly, "You had the chance to save her long ago, but you didn't." When I left the hospital, it felt like I'd walked through a winter longer than a lifetime. Everything was silent, only my footsteps echoing down the cold hallway. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty. That night I sat on the porch watching the light ripple over the lake. Eleanor called, said the police had closed the case. Ethan would face 5 years for conspiracy to defraud. Melissa charged with first-degree attempted murder. I just said, "Thank you, Eleanor. I can sleep now." I hung up and let out a long breath. Thunder rolled across the lake, a low reminder that sometimes justice doesn't come through rage, but through the patience of someone who's seen systems collapse from the inside out. I poured myself a glass of wine, this time perfectly safe. As the taste settled on my tongue, I realized the bitterness wasn't from the drink. It came from the truth itself. Sometimes to survive, a father has to learn to see his own child as a stranger. A week after the trial, I finally felt what silence truly meant. No more knocks on the door from the police, no more calls from lawyers, no more case updates. Just the house by the lake, empty and still so quiet that even the wind brushing the glass made me flinch. Sometimes I still hear Ethan's voice echoing, calling out Dad in despair. But then I remember some cracks once made can never be mended. That morning, Eleanor stopped by carrying a thick envelope. She set it down on the wooden table, her voice low but lighter than before. All the paperwork's done. Ethan got 5 years, Melissa 15. Both their assets are frozen. You're now the sole executor of what's left. I nodded. I don't want to keep it for myself. Eleanor looked at me cautious. I'll transfer 80% into a scholarship fund for tech students' kids who never had the chances I did. The rest goes to Anna. Anna, my 16-year-old granddaughter, Ethan's daughter, the only one who hadn't lost her innocence. She once sent me a handwritten letter after her parents' arrest. The words were clumsy, childish. Grandpa, I don't understand why they did all that, but I still want to visit you. I don't need money. I just want to know you're okay. I cried when I read it. Not from sadness, but because I realized something I thought was dead trust still existed, fragile but alive. That afternoon, Anna came by. She brought a small wooden box. Mom made this for you before she was arrested. She said I should give it to you when I was old enough. I opened it. Inside was an old photo frame, a picture of me, Ethan, and Melissa on their wedding day. I stared at it for a long time. No anger left, only sorrow, for the people who once had happiness and never knew how to protect it. Grandpa, are you sad? Anna asked. I smiled. Yes, but being sad doesn't mean I hate them. It just means some people have to learn their lessons the hardest way. She was quiet, then whispered, Will you ever forgive Dad? I turned toward the lake, the sunset glowing red across the water. Forgive him. Maybe someday. But not today. That evening, I opened my laptop and drafted the final transfer papers for the scholarship fund. At the bottom, I wrote one simple line, created from lost trust, to help others find theirs again. When I hit confirm, I felt something lift inside me. For the first time in months, I felt free, not financially, but free from fear, suspicion, and the wounds that hide beneath the word family. Night fell. The lakewood air turned cold. I sat on the porch, poured a glass of red wine. Its scent rose, rich, bitter. Across the lake, the moon shimmered on the water like a blurred mirror reflecting an old man's face, worn but calm. I thought about it all, the lies, the betrayals, and the moment I chose to live, just to watch them destroy themselves. If someone asked whether I regretted anything, I'd say no. I only regret how long it took me to realize age doesn't make you weaker. It just gives you the patience to watch evil reveal itself. I picked up my phone, hit record, and spoke slowly, a message to anyone who still believes they're powerless against betrayal. Old age doesn't mean weakness. It just means we've learned to stay quiet and wait for the right moment to strike back. Never underestimate a father who's been silent too long. I looked up at the lake and smiled faintly. No anger left, only a cold kind of peace. In that quiet house, I knew I'd reclaimed what mattered most, the right to live on my own terms, no longer prey to anyone's greed. And before I turned out the lights, I whispered to myself, and to anyone who's ever been betrayed, they built a trap for an old man. But I was the one who wrote the blueprint. My story probably ends here. But if you've ever known betrayal, loss, or the kind of wounds that come from the people closest to you, remember this. Sometimes, silence is the strongest strike you can make. Thank you for staying until the end, for listening to my journey. If this story spoke to you, subscribe and share the video so others will know that justice more often than not is born from patience.